Hi again. Well, as a starting point, I would like to show you the rectangles you can see on this um, supply curve. This is demand curve, by the way. The rectangles more better, and these are the small triangles. Here, of course, the supply curve is non-linear, so these are kind of like triangles in this case because these lines are not linear. But this triangle is, for example, more or less like a triangle. And here you can see, here you can see in full sense the rectangle and the small triangle, but we have a small triangles similar for every rectangle, and you can see how when our number of um, units gets larger, um, the triangles get smaller, the small triangles. So basically, this big triangle will be the um, well, almost equal to almost with some negligible mistake equal to the producer's surplus. So, uh, so when we have a large number, we can calculate producer surplus simply by taking this line, which is the minimum, the well, we have actually two different cases. We should mention that. In one case, the supply curve is in the supply curve uh, first intersects with the y-axis. This is the case like the one you see here. That this case basically means that when the price is below 400 uh, or 400 or below, supply will be exactly zero. When the price is above 400, in that case we will have some supply at least. So how do we calculate the consumer surplus in this case? A producer surplus, I'm sorry. Let's see that. So uh, so first we need to calculate the area of this triangle, the H basically. First we need to subtract from the equilibrium price the minimum price at which we will have some, let's say, supply, or the minimum price above which we will have some supply. So 2000 minus 400 times the equilibrium quantity, so which is this side, which is equal to 40,000 times 0.5, since we have a triangle. Um, so it is, I believe, 32, two zeros, and then four zeros, which is $32 million, basically, will be our producer surplus. This case is relatively easy. Now we have a more difficult case, which is this case. In this case, let's copy this also. In this case, basically, let's first try to mention what this case means economically. It means that we have some people, some producers, who are willing to supply a certain good for zero amount. Why? Because in some cases, for example, I had when I was moving from the New York City from my apartment, I need to move all my furniture out. Otherwise, I need to pay a fee. So I would be more than happy to actually anyone who wants to take my furniture, which was actually used for only 1 year, and some of them even not used that much. Actually, I use them rarely. So So it might be possible that for some people, basically, they might just want to get rid of certain stuff other people want. That might be a possibility. Another possibility might be, of course, some people might be just like give up some stuff or do some work and basically do that work for fun. For example, make art pieces and like to give those art pieces away. So for whatever the reason, 200 units, in this case number of workers, 200 people for example, want to work for free, or 200 units of goods is given for free. However, when more is given, then the amount, then if you need more than this amount, then you need to pay some money. Otherwise, more people won't work in this case, or more goods won't be supplied. And in this case, the equilibrium quantity has been 76,000 basically. And when it is the equilibrium quantity is 76,000, in that case, the equilibrium price is $160, and even the people who were willing to work free in this case are actually getting this money, because for them, I mean, getting the money is better than working for free, even though they are okay with free, but still, if they got money, they will get the money. So in this case, the producer surplus for this first 20,000 people is all money they got 160 minus times 20,000. For the rest, we need to calculate this triangle. I mean, this triangle that starts from 0 to 160 and goes from 20,000 to 7,600. So times 160 times 0.5. It's difficult to calculate, kind of. So let me get you the number. The number is this amount: 7,680,000, basically. So this is the one potential, another potential case in case of supply. I mean, some people are willing to supply a certain good or service for free. In that case, I mean, you don't have a triangle anymore, but you have a trapezoid, because for some people the whole money they got is part of the surplus, but for some other people it's not the whole money they got is a surplus. I mean, part of the money was already, I mean, they needed to get it to get into the market. Okay, so this is how the producer surplus is calculated. Total surplus is the consumer surplus plus producer surplus. If there is no revenue gathered by state, it is called market surplus in some cases. If you have a case, a graph like this, it's possible to calculate consumer producer total surplus just by subtracting 10 from 0. Well, where the producer surplus starts, which in this case you have 10. Well, the price from which the consumer surplus starts minus price at which the producer surplus starts times the equilibrium quantity will give you market surplus if there is no regulation. And if you have a triangle like this, if you have a trapezoid, it might change, by the way, but if you have a triangle like this, then you can calculate the total surplus, total market surplus directly without calculating separately consumer and producer surplus. In this case, it is 10 times 500 divided by 2, which is $2,500, I believe. So Here is the trick, a few tricks of the consumer and producer surplus. First, for the concept itself, the whole idea comes from monetary gains, monetary loss. It doesn't represent what this loss means for the people. For example, if a billionaire gets a good for which it is willing to pay $1 million for only $1 and gets almost $1 million surplus, this is a huge benefit for the market. But maybe paying 1 million for that good won't change the living standards of that billionaire that much. For him, his life doesn't get that much better by that. Maybe we don't track this. We are not able to track this. We are ending at the point where we get the monetary benefit for that billionaire. For another person who is below the poverty line, for example, buying the bread at $2 instead of $1 might mean they got half. They miss one meal. For example, they only need to eat, for example, lunch and breakfast, but not the dinner, because they don't have enough food for the dinner, for example, which might decrease their health level, and which might decrease their productivity level, and which might hurt their life significantly. But again, here the loss will become $1 if that amount of that loss is if basically by increasing the price of bread to $2, basically you decrease the market surplus of this guy by $1, and in that case, basically the market surplus is much smaller than, $1 surplus is almost 1/1,000,000th of the surplus. The surplus lost by this person, low-income person, is 1/1,000,000th of the surplus gained by, for example, this billionaire person, for example. And obviously, the people who have more money are willing to pay more for anything, because if you don't have money, you cannot be willing to pay for it, for even the most crucial things, have higher weight in this measurement. And it also doesn't, it stops at the monetary level of gain and loss. It doesn't track down how this monetary gain and loss is following to the rest of the market. And the people who have higher money have more weight, which means, for example, a policy that is actually decreasing market surplus drastically might have huge popular support, because it might be hurting a small number of people who have high income, but benefiting large number of people with very little income. So it doesn't mean loss in market surplus doesn't mean necessarily that majority of people doesn't benefit from that kind of a policy. Of course, this leads to a huge discussion in neoclassical economics, within the welfare economics. How can we measure the society's total welfare? But market surplus certainly has some, at least at initial level, clear deficiencies. Another deficiency it has is it doesn't basically look why a person is basically willing to pay that much of an amount or that little of an amount. For example, a desperate person who doesn't have any other thing to buy might be willing to pay a very high price for the bread, because that he might not have any other option. While a person who has more choices, basically, might be willing to pay less price to the bread. By the way, I will talk a little bit more on this in the coming part, and then we will continue. See you in the next part.